It's no secret that the mainline Pokemon games have been experiencing some fatigue. Not only is the 25-year-old formula failing to stay relevant, but Game Freak seems to be moving at, well, a glacier pace in modernizing archaic aspects. It truly feels like that episode where Charmander almost dies in the mainline series, where, Ash is covering our lad in the rain, giving him all the support that he needs, while his little flame dwindles. Yeah, that kind of feels like the Pokemon fans and Game Freak right now. Pokemon really is in a desperate need of a shakeup. See my older, rougher review of Sword and Shield for my thoughts there, and I do care about this franchise. In fact, let me briefly share with you how Pokemon has impacted me personally. I know, another YouTuber sob story about how great Pokemon is. Like Mini Kinder, I really wanted Pokemon as a kid. In fact, the first gaming system I wanted was a Game Boy to play Pokemon. Not this crazy 3D world that was just being presented to us with the Nintendo 64, but a black and white 8-bit Game Boy game. And playing these games really did impact my future. In a game where you essentially are an animal training ecologist, I went to study biology in college. In a game where you roam a region and find new things to do, I found myself doing field work in Africa and Germany. And in a game where you discover secrets of fossils and ancient history, I got a concentration in ecology and paleobiology. And well, that field work did break my back and my spirit, and well, now I write code for a living. I can directly attribute writing code for a living to Pokemon, which was one of the earliest video games I played. So, when Arceus was announced, I was absolutely stunned. I made a hype video on this channel, and a Pokemon game completely changing up the formula while keeping things familiar just seemed like finally it was going to happen. We had action mechanics, we had an open-ish world, and we had dual analog controls. Imagine that. Keeping familiar things like battling, but bringing in a lot of new, desperately needed things. I mean, this was literally the perfect game for me. Not only was Game Freak trying to do something with the formula, but the shift in focus to basically doing field work was, well, right up my alley. And the cards are certainly stacked in Game Freak's favor for this one. All they needed to do is not fuck it up. So the question is, does Game Freak fuck it up? Please don't fuck it up, Game Freak. So a game that focuses on traditional Japan is ready to throw tradition to the wayside. Arceus is a stark shift away from the traditional turn-based RPG towards a more action-focused adventure. Think Final Fantasy VII to, well, Final Fantasy VII. That's not to say that they've completely removed the turn-based elements, but they've streamlined them and, more importantly, removed abstraction. You do things in Pokemon Arceus where other titles you would have read text. For example, you throw a Pokeball. You aim it and you hit a button. You don't just read you threw a Pokeball. You sneak up on the Pokemon. You don't wander through grass and get a random encounter. You crouch and sneak up on them. You study the Pokemon. It's not just catching them that fulfills your Pokedex entry. You have to do a lot more. And you do it all in this dual analog 3D world. Finally. I know this sounds like 1996, but I mean, Jesus, Game Freak, they finally figured out what Z targeting is and how to roll, straight out of Ocarina of Time. But this fully 3D world really does feel like you are finally able to play a modern Pokemon title. And Arceus pivots from being about being the very best that no one ever was, to putting an emphasis on collecting. Where the meta goal from earlier games was to complete your Pokedex, the primary goal was beating the Pokemon League and overcoming the obstacles in your way. Here, the primary goal is completing the new, well, old Pokedex to the point that the game actually will gate progress behind Pokedex completion. This is the original Pokedex, which is why I said old, so you need to collect a lot more data. This includes a number of Pokemon caught, number of Pokemon caught unseen, number of times you've seen a Pokemon use a move. That's just a few examples of the tasks you're going to have to complete to fill up a Pokemon's Dex entry. There is much more of a focus on collection here. And as someone who previously was not a Dex Maxer, this pivot in focus it was really refreshing, and it did work. I really was more interested in collecting than ever before in a previous Pokemon game. And catching these Pokemon leverages some of the new controls in this new world. Like I said earlier, you sneak up, you throw balls, and you can battle much like you did in the past, but with much more player agency, and it does work surprisingly well. I was expecting Pokemon Let's Go, and I did get something much more. And there are still plenty of battles, and even trainer battles, and while they certainly do take a back seat, the ramped up challenge in those battles is certainly appreciated. The biggest downside to this collectathon is it can kind of depersonalize your Pokemon. In past games, my Bidoof was my Bidoof. And now I have so many goddamn Bidoof. I have a Bidoof warehouse because I need to catch 25 of the damn things. The Pokemon series has been obsessed with streamlining in recent years, but it often came off as dumbing down the experience. A forced experience share, hand-holding tutorials, and overly linear progression. These were largely unsuccessful attempts at diluting what makes Pokemon best. These were largely unsuccessful attempts, which ultimately diluted the formula where Pokemon was probably trying to streamline things. And Arceus makes changes of its own. The moves a Pokemon knows can be swapped whenever for any of that Pokemon. If your Pikachu knows Thunder, every Pikachu you catch going forward is going to be able to know Thunder. And evolves are controlled manually. You don't have to evolve at any given time. You evolve when you're ready to evolve that particular Pokemon. Catching Pokemon without battling levels them up, so you don't even have to engage in a battle to get experience. You could even just have the Pokemon harvest a berry and you'll get experience. And new attack styles allow for multiple attacks and stronger attacks, which basically expedites battles. And if you know that you're going to two-shot a Pokemon, you can use the Agile form to just two-shot the Pokemon and move on to the next fight. And these changes might make a veteran shudder, but this is way more successful than other past attempts at the formula attempting to modernize itself. These changes keep the grind to a minimum and keeps the action at the forefront, ultimately keeping you more engaged as a player and the battles brisker and just getting you ready for the next battle. So Arceus has some clear design shifts. We've removed abstractions of traditional JRPG, and we are moving closer to an action RPG, but we still do have those old traditional battles. We're pivoting to collecting over conquering, reinforcing how you engage with this new world, and the new controls do drag the series finally kicking and screaming into the modern era. And it all does work surprisingly well, but not everything has changed. So yeah, don't worry, Game Freak is still, well, Game Freak. While a lot has changed, there's still plenty of archaic bullshit holding the series back. For example, Game Freak is still obsessed with telling a big fat nothing sandwich, dead brain story. I mean, this is Legends Arceus. This had insane lore implications, the origin of the Pokedex, the origins of Pokemon training, the origins of the Sinnoh region. This was primed to be an actually really genuinely cool story in lore building, and it is actually frankly nothing. Things that are explained are mostly through lore and slightly through story, and what is explained is frankly disappointing. What are the origins of Pokemon training? Funny story, you just missed the origin of that. So basically it's the same as every other generation, except this time everyone sucks at it and is new at it. Okay, well, what are the origins of the Pokeball? Oof, my guy. Well, you did just miss the creation of that, so they're just all made of wood now. And that's disappointing. And the story told really just does nothing. It just moves you from checkpoint to checkpoint, and it even messes up lore from past titles as far as I'm aware. Sure, Poke fans will be correcting me in the comments. The story does pose some weird scenarios also for your 15-year-old protagonist. For example, they constantly talk about how you could die at any moment and you need to help complete this Pokedex or they will banish you into the wilderness for death. Like, what the hell is happening? What is this weird government doing, pioneering expeditions using children as fodder? Why are the times so desperate that colonization of this new land absolutely needs to happen with the death of children on a mass scale on the line? Game Freak is just being really weird with the story beats here. Game Freak is also keen on sticking to an overly repetitive mission design. In old titles, you fought 8 gym leaders to advance to the Pokemon League, defeat the Elite Four, and ultimately becoming the champion, fighting a sabotaging group all along the way. In this game, you fight 5 Lord Pokemon to advance to fighting the final Lord Pokemon while fighting a sabotaging group along the way. I was really hoping that the main quest here would break from tradition and mix in some variety. And side quests are either really solid in Pokemon games or just horrible, and usually the really solid ones are basically just additions to the main campaign in the deluxe re-release of the game. So most actual side quests in Pokemon just suck. Arceus kind of doubles down on the suck. I feel like we're doing boring 1999 open world side quests. Like 9 out of 10 of them are bring me 3 berries, bring me a big Bidoof, find an arbitrary item and bring it back. They are uninspired and usually lack a compelling reward to even bother doing them. So if you're worried about the series changing too much, well, don't. This is still Game Freak we're talking about here. So presentation matters. It sucks you into a game and keeps you there. Presentation is basically second to gameplay in providing immersion, and a break in that presentation can be a break in immersion. So while this section may be a little harsh, it's because in fact it is important. Historically, companies big and small have overcome hurdles, both in technology and team size, to adapt their presentation accordingly. In fact, Pokemon itself is a great example, using the original Game Boy to create this vast, expansive world by way of a turn-based RPG. And so I know, guys, I'm going to be harsh. Game Freak, after all, they're just a small, budding indie studio. They really don't have a ton of resources. And this is really, really hard for them. I mean, they just found out where the right analog stick is. But in all seriousness, Pokemon is literally the single most profitable intellectual property in the world. We're talking $110 billion in sales. They have all of the money and none of the excuses here. So let's start with the open world aspect. It could be argued that the Switch just can't handle such a big open world. Well, please see some examples of, well, way more consistent open worlds on Nintendo Switch. And with that out of the way, I want to start to tackle just a few of the technical decisions which leave me scratching my head. Let me start off with a positive, which is actually going to kind of shape future critiques here. The game runs at a surprisingly high resolution. It's native 720p handheld and it's dynamic docked up to 4K. In Game Freak's defense, most open world games on the Switch don't attempt that. Zelda, for example, attempts 900p docked. Xenoblade, well, that's sad, frankly, in handheld mode, and Skyrim similarly uses sub-native resolutions to achieve its visual fidelity. That being said, all of these games employ much more impressive visuals and post-processing effects. Pokemon's technical presentation disappoints me in a few key ways. First off, there's no anti-aliasing, which I know this is a children's game and I'm talking about anti-aliasing, but it really does almost kill the higher resolution seeing all these jaggy lines. There's no good LOD management, so there's insane pop-in issues. Pokemon at a distance run at a pathetically low frame rate, which really kills selling them as creatures. Perhaps most importantly, the game's frame rate is an absolute mess. I do, however, appreciate the artistic decision to have the Ice Boss kill the frame rate the most to kind of make it feel like you feel frozen. And all these issues really do bring the presentation down quite a bit, and it really can take you out of it when you see some of this just really bad looking stuff, which is why the higher resolution kind of baffles me. Just drop the resolution, sure up your frame rate, and strengthen the effects, and I'm sure a lot of people would have been a lot happier with how this game looks. And there are also occasional bugs, no, not those bugs, which got in the way. Quests would occasionally break. NPCs would vanish into thin air, and I couldn't capture this because, well, the game doesn't support replays. All of the space-time distortions were completely bugged for me, so I was not able to ever get any items in there. I think there are various visual glitches where assets are just rapidly flickering in and out, And I think there were musical glitches, or I just don't understand the sound engineering of this game and how they intended to deliver the music in this game. So kind of with that, we'll transition into some artistic direction things that I perhaps don't agree with. This is less technical and more, I'm just scratching my head. The music in this game actually does bang. This is some of my favorite music in Pokemon, period. What I don't get is how the music is delivered. The music seems to come in and out with almost no transition and arbitrarily. You'll move across an invisible wall and suddenly the song will stop. And what I know isn't a bug or a weird technical choice is the mood of the music. While the music does genuinely slap, sometimes the mood just does not fit at all what you're doing in the game. And in terms of visuals, besides the general issues of effects, level of detail, etc., my biggest issue is the bad animations. They are either just flat out bad, or the game frequently does this thing that I absolutely hate in anime. You know where they're saving their budget for the big fight scene at the end of the season, so they just cut to black, make a noise, and make you imagine what happened? Yeah, that happens a lot in Pokemon Legends. So that really sucks. But I am going to do one last call out. This game feels like a blatant copy of Breath of the Wild. The cel-shaded art, the wandering wilds aspects, mechanics like climbing, and the gentle piano. And the problem with that is it ultimately comes off as a cheap copy of Breath of the Wild, and that's kind of a shame. This is more of a Genshin Impact than a Breath of the Wild in my book, and oof, that is not a good thing. But despite the past two sections, Pokemon simply cannot go backwards from this. This has to be the way forward for this series. It all comes down to removing the abstractions that I talked about in the beginning. You are so much more in control of your character, so much more actionable. This player agency simply can't be revoked. Running around the world, seeing Pokemon, sneaking up on them, tactically throwing and crafting items, all with the faster paced yet still traditional battle system, is truly a fresh air for the Pokemon series and what the series so desperately needed. So yeah, this game really did surprise me in terms of my enjoyment of the core loop. But there are a few things I would like to see improved going forward with the Legends series. All of the side quests should boost your rank, and it would at least make the dumb ones worth doing. The repetition of the main quest is a bad habit making its return. They really need to create a less repetitive, more interesting main quest going forward. No player versus player. Seriously, no player versus player in a Pokemon game, enough said. And while there are trainer battles, I really hope they add more going forward. I do like the shift in focus to collecting, but I still think that there should be more battles than just with wild Pokemon than there are in this game. And if it wasn't made abundantly clear, there are some technical aspects which need a bit of touching up. But if this is indeed a new chapter for the Pokemon series, and it is pointing the series in a whole new direction, well then great, count me in. But if this was the core shakeup that's going to represent the next 20 years of Pokemon, this simply isn't enough. And if Game Freak's past history is anything to go by, I really hope the Legends series continues to push forward rather than snooze like a Snorlax.